right, and welcome to the Courtenay Turner podcast. I'm your host, Courtenay, and I'm super passionate about moving and thinking. On this show, we are going to dive into all things health, fitness, personal development, lifestyle, and political sociocultural. I've always been fascinated by people, and I love learning from the experiences and stories of others. This has been a treat for me, and I hope this is enjoyable and useful for you. As always, if you have any questions, comments, or any way that I can make this a better experience for you, please don't hesitate to reach out. Hello, and welcome to the Courtenay Turner podcast. I am here today with my friend Danita Knickerbocker. She's a former military vet. She currently works for the Department of Homeland Security, and we are teaming up together with some others to start a new media site, which is a counter to Media Matters, and it's called TruthMatters. Thank you so much for joining me today, Danita. How are you doing?
Yeah, for sure. I'm doing great. Today's been a busy day, so it's good to sit down and relax a little bit.
Yeah, that's awesome. I feel like it's been a really busy year so far.
It's only been 1 month. Oh my gosh.
I know. It feels like that 1 month has been kind of like a year.
We're going to go through 12 years in the next 12 months, just so everybody knows. No, just kidding.
Yeah, no, that's the way it feels anyway, because last year was like a decade. So this year will be like 12 years.
Seriously, though.
I don't know. Maybe we'll return to some semblance of normalcy, whatever that means. But yeah.
I know everybody's talking about this new normal, and I'm like, okay, that does not sound fun. We should not think of that as normal. It's not okay.
I couldn't agree more. I find that horrifying, actually, that I don't want to.
It's just like accepting it.
Right. I do not want to adjust to any kinds of new normal. Yeah. I think things never quite, you never return to, like, every minute is different, right? So you never really return to what something was, but I think that the trajectory of the way things are going right now is not something that should be accepted. So to call it a new normal.
Yeah,
no, for sure.
And there's a difference between like progressing and having things change and having things turn into complete chaos and then just accepting it as, well, this is the new normal. Just do it. It's okay. It's like, no, sorry.
I totally agree with that. Yeah. So you served in the military. What made you decide to go into the military?
Well, I think I was about 3 or 4 years old when I first was like, I'm going to go into the military. And I think at that point in time, it was really, I didn't grow up in a very good, nice, fun environment in my house. And I think it was more of like an escape that I think that I wanted at that point in time. And then it grew into something more. Obviously, when I got to like high school age, I was like, I like guns, and I wanted to join because I liked guns and all this stuff. But I mean, when I was high school age, I couldn't even run maybe 40 meters without like having a freaking asthma attack. Like, I was not military fit at all. But I wanted to be in the military because, they had guns, right? By the time that I graduated from high school,
when did you?
I think it really.
Sorry,
what was that?
Had you shotguns as a kid? Obviously not a 3-4. I would hope not. But
a couple of times. I had my older brothers and uncles and stuff. They had like 22s and stuff like that, which are not. I mean, I still consider those guns, but not really anything powerful enough to kill anything other than like a squirrel, But I grew up in Idaho, really small town in Idaho, and we used the 22s to shoot potatoes off the fence post, or, like just silly things like that. So I had shotguns before, and I think I had shot maybe 2 shotguns before graduating high school. Like I said, I grew up in Idaho, so like everybody had guns anyways. Like kids had guns. Most of my friends at the age of like 10, 11, 12, they were out hunting and actually killing like huge deer at 10 years old. Wow. So it's just a different environment.
Sure.
Obviously, they eat everything that they kill. Nothing has ever gone to waste. And
Right.
they'll use the hides for rugs or clothing, things like that. So it's not ever like just for sport.
Right.
But yeah, so that was kind of my experience with guns before joining the military. And yeah, so I graduated high school when I was 17, and I went off to college, and I wanted to enlist, but I knew that if I enlisted, I would never go to school because I hate school like so much with a burning passion. I hate school. When I was little, I actually stopped doing all homework and schooling for about 5 years to kind of help raise my younger siblings because I was homeschooled. And I was so far ahead in my academics that it didn't matter. So I literally took like 4 or 5 years off of schooling, didn't do anything for 4 or 5 years, and then went straight into high school right after that, and I graduated high school in 2.5 years.
Wow.
So
We had a
it's just
actually, I kind of had that because I went to Montessori school, and the school went up to sixth.
yes.
So I started in third grade, and in third grade, by October, I had finished their sixth grade math textbook. They didn't have anything else for me to do because it only went to sixth grade. They're like, okay, go into the library and read.
Yes.
And then I read all the books in the library. No, it was a small pool, but by January, they were like, okay,
Yeah.
entertain yourself. So yeah, that's funny.
Yeah. And I don't know, my parents are they raised us to question everything, and always like, whatever you do, don't ever just take something at face value and just accept it.
Right.
Like, if somebody is telling you something that maybe you don't feel 100% about, go and research it. Be like, no, that's not for me right now. I'll look into it though. Don't ever just be like, no, I'm not ever going to do that, because that's not a way to live your life, right? Never trying anything, never, doing any new things. That's not really a good, happy, fun, fulfilling way to live your life.
Sure.
But to have more of a mindset of like, that doesn't really sound right to me. I'll try it maybe, but let me look into it first, So we were homeschooled most of our lives. We were all homeschooled. And then we would go to like high school to get more of the social interaction. I have 10 siblings, so there's 11 kids.
Wow.
So it's not like we ever didn't have social interaction. There was a lot of kids.
There's all biological. You're 11.
Yep.
Wow.
My mom just kept popping us out every year and a half, just having another baby.
And what number are you?
So there's 19 years between the oldest and the youngest. So the youngest just barely became an adult last year. He's turning 19 in March this year. So that's kind of crazy. He's all of our little baby. And he doesn't like that we think that he's a baby still because he's an adult. But you know how that goes, And then my oldest sibling, Jean-Michel, let's see, if he's 18, then he's 37. So, yeah.
Are you all
fun? I'm number 8.
You're number 8. Okay.
I would say that as adults, we're much better at having good, complete conversations. But I think that that's also helpful. Like, as kids, we argued a lot and we got into a lot of fights. We did not agree on basically anything. Like, we were always disagreeing with one another, right? But you're trapped in this house. I mean, we were homeschooled. We didn't really go out and do a whole lot of stuff. So it's like, you have to get along. And if you don't, you are going to see that person every day and just know that they are hating you and that they're upset at you, And so you get into this, you get this ability, I think. You gain this ability to really disagree with somebody and be like, I still love you though. And no matter what you think or what you say or what you do, if I disagree, I'm going to say it straight up. Hey, I don't agree with that. And this is why I don't agree with that, whether it's your action that I don't agree with or what you say. But to like shut somebody off, we don't do that anymore in our family, really. We did as kids, obviously. But we were able to get that experience at a really young age. So now, I mean, all 11 of us, we get together and we still disagree on basically everything. Like, we have a range of like atheist to agnostic to really LDS Mormon family, like all in 11 siblings, right?
Oh.
So not even extended family. Like, we're not even talking about extended family at this point. So when anything about God comes up, or abortion or anything like that, like, there's always different sides to everything, and we have to be able to just talk about it. And at the end of the day, we still give each other hugs and we say I love you, and we don't speak badly of one another. We don't see each other in a negative light, even if we're like mad or upset about what somebody said or whatever. It just isn't that way anymore. And I think that comes from just really a lot of that happening when we were little, that now we can really have those conversations. And I feel like society today, they're not good at having those conversations. Yeah. And that frustrates me, because I'm like, you're literally acting like I was acting when I was 4 years old. Like, what's wrong with you? You're 25 years old. Get over yourself. Like, that's how I feel. But not everybody grew up how I grew up. So I can't blame them or fault them for it.
I have a friend who wrote the Kindergarten of Eden, and it's like how everything we should have learned, you know, in kindergarten, nursery school, but today's generation really didn't, you know.
They didn't, and it's
big families like that anymore. That's very uncommon. It used to be much more common.
It's not even as common in like the Mormon community in Utah as it used to be. Most families in Utah, well, aside from like the FLDS Mormons that are polygamous, general LDS families, they have anywhere from like 3 to 6 is like a normal family size.
Which is a lot more than most of the American population. The traditional Mormons,
Yeah, for sure. And here, I mean, it is strange. Even here, when I tell people how many siblings I have, they're like, is your dad a polygamist? I'm like, no, my mom just, you know, they liked having sex and they didn't use birth control. Okay? Like, I would hope that your parents liked to have sex too. Okay?
Right.
They just knew to use birth control. I don't know. But yeah.
So you finished high school in 2.5 years, and then you decided to go into the military from there. So where did that go?
So I actually, as I was saying before, I guess got a little sidetracked. You're good. I hate school. I really would rather not ever go to school ever again. And so, but I knew that I needed to go to college for some reason. I don't know what it was.
Okay.
So instead of enlisting, I ended up contracting in an Army Reserve Officer Training Corps program.
Mm-hmm.
And we would do trainings all over the U.S., do competitions. They taught us all like the basic Army stuff. I ended up having a few internships with people through like NSA and other 3-letter agencies. And it was a really cool opportunity. And what was interesting is my entire graduating class, all of them were prior enlisted, like 7 to 15 years. Like, they were some older guys. They'd been enlisted forever, and now they were just becoming officers. And for me, I just really hate being told what to do. So that was another reason why I was like, enlisted, I don't know about that. So as soon as I joined, I was like, contracting, Army, ROTC, that way I can learn everything I need to know. And I am just a sponge. Like, I think you've probably realized that since you've met me. I'm just a sponge for information. Like, I take everything in, and I really do go and research a lot, which is interesting because I hate school, right?
That's why I'm very
But I like to research. I love learning. I love learning. But I hate being told, you have to know this and you have to learn this. Like, I don't like that. So,
I don't like being told.
Anyway, so I
Yeah. So that makes sense.
Yeah, for sure.
It's a very narrow path and very specific, and you're being told you have to do this now, and you have to learn this specifically. So, and do it this way. So,
yeah, for sure. So once I joined, it was interesting because after about a year, I had master sergeants who had been in the military for, 17 plus years. I had staff sergeants, I had sergeant first class, and tons of officers, high grade officers like lieutenant colonels, full bird colonels, majors, all of these people that were like, Nick, they called me Nick for Knickerbocker. They're like, Nick, you honestly, like, comparing to everybody else in your class, you know so much, and you've only been in a year. Like, how does that happen? I'm like, I don't know. I just retain information and I make a lot of mistakes. Like, I think I view making mistakes as learning opportunities. And so I intentionally just like try everything. I try every avenue of approach and I do all these things. And then oftentimes shit hits the fan. And then Danita has to learn a lesson.
That's amazing. Because I think most people are so afraid of making mistakes that they don't learn. You're absolutely right. That's the best way to learn.
Yeah. So I realized quickly that a lot of enlisted people viewed officers straight out of like ROTC programs as like they didn't know anything. They say you can't spell lost without LT for lieutenant, right? Because you would get these new lieutenants out of ROTC programs that literally could not read a map.
Wow.
They could not, like, it was bad. And then they're supposed to be in charge of like an entire company and their lives. Like they're supposed to be in charge of all these guys' lives. Yeah. And so I realized that very early on. So what I did was I decided to just soak up everything I could from both officer and enlisted. And I got to where I could really understand the struggle of an enlisted person, right? Where they're the bottom of the food chain. They get treated horribly, like all the time. And the only reason that they're in the military is because they either needed money for college or their life was worse before than the military, which really sucks. Or they went enlisted because they didn't feel like they could go officer route and actually get a degree in college because maybe they didn't feel like they were smart enough or whatever. And there's just this stigma behind enlisted personnel, right? And so I really wanted to put myself in that situation and put myself in those shoes. And so I would go to like drill with people that were enlisted and be like, how do you actually get treated? Because I don't ever want to be an officer that treats you like that, right? I don't ever want to be an officer that's like, well, this is what we're doing. And too bad. If you don't like it, sucks to be you, right? Not that I don't ever say that. Sometimes I'm like, well, this is, I'm sorry. I really am sorry. And I apologize ahead of time, but this is the last avenue of approach and we have to do it. And I'm never going to say, and so you have to do it. It's going to be, so we have to do it. And funny enough, now that I'm in DHS, I did some interviews for some promotions in DHS, and the only feedback that I ever get that's like negative feedback is that I am too militaristic when I describe my my successes and my failures, right? When I describe my successes, I say, we did this and we did this and we accomplished this objective and we did this and it was awesome and my team did this and this and this, right? And then anytime that they're like, what's something you could get better at, you know? I describe in detail ways that I am like a failure, right? I'm like, I suck at this. And so I choose to go and get my own schooling and go and learn about this subject if I really suck at it, right? But I'm really bad at it. And so they said that almost every time they interview a military that was prior enlisted, not prior officer, they have this way when they interview is that they describe their successes as we, a team, and they describe any failures as me, I suck, I'm bad, it was my fault, right?
So interesting.
And I was like, oh, interesting that I really set out at 17, 18 years old to really understand both sides, enlisted and officers, so that I could be the best leader possible, not just the best officer, but the best leader possible. And with that, I found out years later, I mean, that interview, the first interview I ever got with DHS where I got told that was 2 years ago. So I joined 2013, was out late 2017, 4 or 5. So about 6 years later, somebody told me this, right? And I was like, well, I'm glad that stuck, because that was a goal of mine that I had set for myself, of really ingraining that in myself, you know, in not being conceited, really staying humble, but also knowing that I am confident. I'm confident in my decisions. And when shit hits the fan, I will take full responsibility. Like 100%, it's my fault. Get mad at me. Everybody else can just keep going, doing what they're doing. So.
And you feel like you learned that from taking on both roles in the military?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. If I had solely focused on becoming an officer, right? I even spoke with one of our colleagues in one of the Patriot groups that we're in the other day, and there's a lot of officers out there that when they're new officers, it's really hard for them to really see the side of the enlisted personnel, because they haven't ever experienced that. They came right out of college and they're there and they expect to lead and to take charge, right? It's like, yeah. And maybe you do know as much as them. Maybe, but maybe you don't. And maybe you don't know each and every person in that platoon yet. And you don't know how they're going to react to certain things. You don't know exactly who's going to be best in what position for what job. You know, you have to rely on your NCOs. And that's something that I learned very quickly. And I think that came from the fact that everybody else in my graduating class, they were all prior enlisted, like years prior enlisted. And so I was able to really learn from them. And I graduated distinguished military graduate and things like that. And it was interesting, you know, to see that by the time we got out, obviously I didn't have the 10, 15 years of experience that they did, but I was able to soak in so much experience and information and knowledge, and really turn that into attributes that connected, rather than, there are people that soak it all in and it's like the difference between book knowledge and street knowledge, you know? So there's always a difference, right? And so I don't know, I have a lot of book knowledge, but I try as hard as possible to really turn it into street knowledge and really exercise it and put it out there in actual actions that I'm doing. And I don't know, I think you learn better that way. But I'm also a kinesthetic learner. So I can hear something and remember it, and I can see something and remember it, almost photographic memory like. But to actually learn something, I have to just do it, you know?
Yep. I understand that. I'm a kinesthetic learner as well. Yeah, I think that's actually more rare. Most people are either visual or auditory. Less people are kinesthetic in their learning styles.
Well, I don't know if I'm left or right. I don't know. I'm an artist, but I also am like on the other spectrum too, where I'm really good with like business and numbers and things like that. So it's interesting. It's really interesting.
It's a great combo. That's awesome. So you I mean, that's awesome. But you left the military. It was a medical discharge for,
so I branched military police and I was going criminal investigations. And just a couple of months before I was set to go active duty status, I I was diagnosed with leukemia, and it's chronic myelogenous leukemia. And it literally, the diagnosis came out of the blue. Like, there was no like, oh, I feel sick, for months and months on end. It was really like, I woke up one morning and I was in a lot of pain, and I was like, what is going on? And my stomach started growing, and I was like, what is going on? And I went to PT, and all the guys, I was married at the time, and all the guys were like, oh, Nick, are you pregnant? Ha ha ha. And they were like poking my stomach, and I'm like, oh, no, that actually really hurts. Like, I don't know what's going on. I was like, you guys saw me yesterday, and I was not this big. Like, something is wrong. Like, I am not pregnant. And they were like, ha ha ha, whatever, just joking around, And I was like, okay, so I let on with the jokes. And then I went home and I was just like, I really am in a lot of pain. So then the next morning I went to PT again, and I could like barely breathe. And the pain was rising up into my chest, and my stomach was getting bigger and bigger till I looked like I was almost like 6 months pregnant, 7 months pregnant. Like, I was big. And it wasn't even like, I don't know how to say it, like soft. It was like a rock. Like, my stomach was like a rock. And I was like, okay, something is really wrong. So I'm at PT, and I'm like, I'm not running, first of all. But everything that I do, I wanted to always lead by example and like take part in any of the workouts, whatever, So I went, and I'm like, I'm over there trying to do sit-ups, and my stomach is literally like huge. So I was like, okay, I'll go do pull-ups. So I go, and I'm trying to do pull-ups, and obviously when you do pull-ups, your abs kind of tighten, and I could not breathe. I was like, something is seriously wrong. So I went home, and I asked my now ex-husband, but my husband at the time, I asked him for a blessing. One of his friends came over. They gave me a blessing, and I went to sleep. The next morning, I woke up, and I literally couldn't breathe. Like, the pain had gone up into my neck, and I was like suffocating, and I was like, okay, we need to go to the doctor. Something is really wrong. And this is another thing you should know about my family, is we never really went to doctors growing up, like, ever. If we got a long cut, my dad, he was a midwife, so he would just like super glue it or stitch it up. The only time we really went to the doctors is like if somebody got a broken leg or a full-on huge broken bone, right? Even like when I break my toes, I normally just wrap them together, and I'm like, okay, they'll heal.
They're really, I broke a toe. There's really not much you can do. So yeah, for that
there's not much you can do, but they're so painful, right? Anyway, so I finally, after like 2 days of hell, I was like, okay, Danita, you should probably go to the doctor. So I scheduled an appointment with my OBGYN, and she, the only time I'd ever seen my OBGYN was literally to get birth control. Like, I had never gone in for like appointments. I just never went to the doctor. I hardly ever went to the dentist. Like, it just was not a thing. So I go in, and she goes, are you sure you're not pregnant? And I was like, I came in to get birth control like a month and a half ago. This doesn't happen in a month and a half, and it's painful, and I can't breathe. Like, we need to do something. Like, we need to figure this out. So she does an ultrasound, and she goes, okay, there's a lot of fluid in your stomach. It could be an appendix burst or maybe a cyst that had burst. And she said, either way, we can't really tell with an ultrasound, so you're gonna have to go over to the actual hospital and get a CAT scan. And I was like, oh, what's that? I was like, I don't know what that is.
Wow.
And when she said CAT scan, I hate cats because I'm allergic to cats. So I was like, what is that? Right? I was like freaking out. And so we got there. They gave me this drink that like made me feel like I was peeing my pants. Contrast. And because they couldn't hook it up into an IV because my veins are also really tiny. That's another lovely thing. about me. And so that was really weird. And I was like, this is a really weird experience. Okay. And I get out of the CAT scan and I go and wait in the waiting room. And we were there for almost 5 hours, just sitting there. And the doctor finally came in and he looks like super aggressed up, right? And he goes, sorry, I just delivered a baby. I was like, okay. He goes, actually, I just delivered like 5 babies. I was like, okay, so any news on the images? And he said, well, you have a really large spleen and really large lymph nodes. And I was like, okay. And he goes, so we think that you could have cancer possibly. And I was like, okay. And he goes, we also see that a very large ovarian cyst has burst. So that is probably what is causing a lot of the pain and things like that. So I was like, okay, so what next? He goes, well, we need to test you for anemia because your red blood cell count is pretty low. We need to test you for anemia before we can go in and like clean anything out. Because he said that ovarian cysts, sometimes they can just clean themselves out and filter themselves out. But my stomach didn't seem to be doing that, obviously. And so I was like, okay. And I also asked him, I was like, so I don't know anything about anatomy, but you said my spleen is really large. And he goes, yeah, you know the little hotel soap bars that you get? Well, that's the size that your spleen should be, like really small. And I was like, okay. He goes, yours is like the size of a football. I was like, okay, good to know.
Not good.
That's why your stomach is so big, right? I was like, all right, well, I guess this is happening, right? So they sent me home with some narcotics because I was not sleeping well. And I got home, went to sleep, and they called me in the morning with my blood test results. And that was a very interesting, funny phone call because they started off with, please don't be alarmed. And I was like, okay.
the first thing you
And then
I'm alarmed, right?
Right? And then they said, how fast can you get to the hospital? I was like, don't be alarmed, but how fast can you get here? Okay,
Usually
the wheels are turning.
Yeah. Okay.
Right? I was like, okay. So then they passed me off to another doctor. And it was the doctor I had talked to before, the night before. And he goes, I want you to go get in your car and start coming on over here. I was like, okay. And he goes, I'm going to have you meet with a leukemia specialist. And I said, okay. And he says, because we've diagnosed you with leukemia. We just have to figure out which kind of leukemia.
And how
I was like, okay. This was 4 years ago. So 22.
Wow.
Well, I was 21 and I turned 22 4 weeks after I was diagnosed.
Wow.
So yeah, it was very interesting. So yeah, we got there and the doctors were like, you're alive. And I was like, yeah. And they were like, your blood count is like so high. Like it's so high. And I was like, hey, I don't know what that means. Like, what is so high, right? And they were like, well, your normal white blood cell count should be 4 to 11. And we normally diagnose cancer around like 40, 45. Normally when you get sick, your white blood cell count will go up to like 20s in order to fight off infection, things like that. And he goes, yours is 364. And I was like, oh, okay. And he goes, I've never seen anybody with that count personally. I was like, okay, what does all this mean, right? And I'm like super calm at this point. I think I was probably in shock because I wasn't crying. I wasn't like freaking out. The first question I actually asked was, what's going to happen to my hair? Which my husband was pissed that I asked that first. He's like, aren't you afraid of dying? I was like, no, I'm afraid of losing my hair. Like, I really don't want to lose my hair.
I understand.
And then, of course, I asked, like, am I going to die? Right. And they were like, well, not yet. We have other ways to fight it off. But as of right now, it's not one that can really go in remission and it's not curable. So, and right when they said that, I knew. I was like, the military is going to discharge me. That's when I started crying. I just started bawling. And my colonel called me and he goes, Danita, how are you? And I was like, they're gonna kick me out of the military. And he goes, Danita, are you alive? Are you okay? Like, what's happening? Do we need to meet you at the hospital? And I was like, they're gonna kick me out of the military. Like, that's all I ever wanted. I was so upset. So that was an interesting time. Like, I literally did not care about my life. I didn't care about anything other than, like, am I going to lose my hair? And then when I realized I was going to be discharged, I just was so upset. I was so upset. But yeah, so I was discharged medically. And after that, I went to Norway looking for cures for my cancer, because Norway has they're one of the top countries in the world for curing cancer. And they have the lowest percentage of cancer per capita because of things like the natural way that they live over there. Typically, obviously they're getting more, how do I say this? Western civilized, using a lot more inorganic, other foods,
Maybe
and
industrialized,
commercialized. There we go.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, obviously their cancer rates are rising and things like that, just like everywhere else in the world does when you stop just eating from the land itself and living as pure natural life as you can.
System. Yeah. It should be.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. Like you said at the beginning,
yeah, for sure.
The things that you hunted, that is how it's supposed to work.
Yeah. And obviously not just hunted, but growing and things like that, right? And so I went there and I was just searching for cures, and I found a couple of things that could help, help keep the cancer under control, like oxygen therapy, vitamin C therapy. There's these things called beta glucans that, when they're natural and organic from the soil itself, they are often called cancer killers, and they are natural in the soil in Scandinavia and nowhere else in the world.
Oh.
So that's also interesting, right? But obviously people make beta glucan in labs and they give it out as pills and stuff like that too. So you can get it in other forms. It's just not as natural as getting it from the ground there. So
synthetic forms, or they take
okay,
yeah.
I mean, just like everything else, most things, I use a lot of like essential oils, and people are like, well, why do you do that? Like, well, it's just the organic form of what they are giving you in a pill at the doctor. They just have figured out a way to make it synthetic and produce mass millions and millions and trillions of pills of it, and then you take it at home, right? Or you could just go get a plant itself and drink the tea of it, or, so I definitely have become more knowledgeable of the medicinal world ever since I got diagnosed. I mean, I can watch movies and stuff now, and people say things and I'm like, hey, I know what that is. Or, different procedures. I'm like, that's lovely. I've had that happen to me. It's not very lovely, but okay, but I still stick to my roots of more holistic approaches to things, and it keeps me happier. I don't know that it's going to keep me healthier for longer, just because I already have the cancer now, and it's not like the only person that can really take it away is God, and if he wants to do that, he's going to do it. If not, I'm going to live with it. I'm going to do what I can to be happy and live a fulfilled life with it. So
absolutely. What do they say the prognosis is? Do they give you any, or are they?
So I could either take chemo every day for the rest of my life, or not, and let it go as long as it's going to go, right? I decided to go off of my chemo because it was just horrible. It was really horrible. People, they see people that go through chemo, like IV chemo, and they're like, they are just completely like a different person, just a skeleton for like weeks, right? And I'm like, yeah, so That's what I feel like every day, all day. And I just put a smile on my face, and nobody knows unless they ask me. If somebody asks me how I'm doing, I'm like, yeah, I'm doing really shitty. And they're like, oh, really? Really? And I'm like, yes. And I'm feeling really shitty with a smile on my face so that not everyone asks me, you know, because I don't like to lie either. And I don't like to, if somebody asks me a question, I'm going to answer it basically. And I'm going to answer it as truthfully and honestly as I can. So I just try to make it so that people don't ask me those questions, right?
Like,
so
avoid this. Yeah. I remember when I was in
how can we avoid it?
I went to school upstate New York, so I would get sick a lot because, you know, it's constantly snowing, it's super cold, and it's actually like in the Guinness Book for like the fewest sunny days. So, you know, you're really depressed, and yeah, it was brutal. But I would be sick, but the sicker I was, the more of an effort I would make, you know, like I would do my hair, my makeup, and like put myself together and go to class, you know. And so people started to realize, like, the better I seemed, the worse I must have felt, because they would ask me, how are you doing? I'm like, fever of 104, you know. Like, oh, I was going to say, you look so pretty today. I'm like, yeah, I'm really trying to, you know, put on a brave face here, like, so that nobody asked me how I'm feeling, but apparently didn't want to, you know?
Yeah. No, when I was in the military, all of my guys, they would be like, Nick must be on her period. I'm like, how do you know that? And they're like, well, because you put mascara on for PT today. I was like, okay, stop. Okay. I don't need your bullshit right now. Like, don't mouth off to me. But I mean, they would all know, because I'm like, the worse I feel normally, the louder I laugh, the more I laugh, the more happy I seem, because I really just, first of all, I don't want people asking questions as much, right? But I don't mind answering the questions when they're asked, right?
Sure.
And then on top of that, because I am feeling miserable, I do everything I can to feel happy. So I crack a lot of jokes. I laugh a lot. I laugh very loudly. I laugh at myself. I laugh at other people, and some people find that rude.
Cured themselves of cancer by laughing. I'm not saying that that's like always going to happen, but it has happened. So
yeah. I mean, I always say laughter is the best medicine.
Definitely.
Because I honestly, oh no, you go. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, we hold so much in our muscle, like memory in our muscles. So as an actress, one of the things that I would do is, if I had to laugh in a scene, I would make the facial expression as if I was laughing, and I would start to feel like happy and giddy, and I would actually naturally laugh. I did the same when I had to cry. You know, I'd start to like tear, like, you know, make the facial expression, but because you have like muscle memory in your face and all of your muscles, it actually triggers that.
Yeah.
So yeah, if you present yourself as feeling happier and giddier, you might actually feel that way. Yeah. So.
Yeah, and mentally, I feel happy most of the time. It's just physically, I'm on chemo every day, all day, and that you can see the toll of if you live with me all day, every day, which is why I'm divorced. Because it's really hard to live with. Yeah, and it's hard to be, especially a husband that feels the need to take care of your wife and be there for her, and really not necessarily solve all of her problems, but like take away some of her pain, right? Whereas for me, like my ex-husband, you can't take my pain away from me. Right. Like it just doesn't happen. And until you live with me 24/7, you're not going to see, because anytime I'm out in public with other people, I'm not going to be bawling my eyes out. But I can promise you, I bawl my eyes out 2 to 3 hours a night in pain, right? So it's like, and this is like every night. And so once you live with me, then it's like, okay, this is a lot to handle. And I'm like, yeah, I know. Trust me, if I could run away from it, I would too. But I can't.
You're like, trust me, I would choose that option as well.
The closest I've ever gotten to running away from it was I went off my chemo 2.5 years ago, And my doctors were like, oh my gosh, you're going to die in like 3 months. And then they were like, no, maybe you'll have a year. Maybe you'll have a year and a half. But then my counts would go skyrocketing. And I'm like, I feel great. I'm not on chemo. My bones aren't breaking when I'm walking. I can go hiking. I feel amazing. I can eat whatever I want. I do whatever I want, and I feel great, right? Even though my cancer is like, phew, and my doctors are scared out of their minds.
Sure.
But I'm like, I feel great. So what's the incentive? What's the incentive to taking a drug that is killing you to keep you alive, that makes you feel like you're not actually living? Like, what's the incentive? Especially, yeah, quality of life is like, for me, quality of life is huge, because I grew up thinking I was going to be in the military and I was going to die at a young age anyways. Like, I was fully prepared to die at war at like 25 to 35 years old. Like, I didn't ever expect to live till an old age anyways, like since I was little.
Wow.
So for me, I'm like,
what's
the incentive?
We were going to be, sorry. Did you anticipate that we were going to be at war, that you were going to be on the front lines of us?
I mean, I had always hoped of that. Not hoped that we would be at war, but if there was a war, that I would be on the front lines. Okay. Everybody that goes in the military hopes that they're in infantry and that they're in the fight, you know. Everybody in the military that joins hopes that. Well, those that join of their own free will. Maybe not those that join because they're pressured by their parents or because they have to get the money for college. But for those that really want to be in the military, that's generally their push is they want to go infantry, they want to go special forces, they want to do this and that, they want to jump out of helicopters, right? And it's not that I wanted to die at a young age. I just expected that, you know, there's so many things that can happen. I mean, people's parachutes don't open sometimes when they're jumping out of airplanes. Okay, well, that could happen, right? So I hope for the best, but I prepare for the worst. And I had prepared at a very young age to not live for a super long life on this earth, right? And so now, getting cancer, I'm like, I don't really care about living a long time. I just want to be happy. Like, so for me, it's more of a quality of life over quantity of life. Whereas for most of my family, and they've kind of gotten over this a little bit. They've gotten more to where they're okay picking quality of life over quantity. But when I first went off my medication, they were not happy. They were like, you're going to die and this is suicide. And I was like, no, it's not suicide. It's just letting it take its course, right? This has happened to me. The cancer has happened. It's not ever going away. So what am I going to do with that, right? And how am I going to live my life happy and fulfilling if I completely all the time don't feel like I'm living? Like, that's no way of life, and that's not living, right? So that's my take on that. Right now I am taking chemo because there's a few things. They thought that maybe we could try a bone marrow transplant back in March, and part of the agreement for the bone marrow transplant was that I would take the chemo until transplant to prove that I wouldn't just go off my medication after the transplant and make all of their hard work just go to shit. So my way of proving that I would stay on the medication after transplant was I made a promise that I would stay on the chemo until transplant. Well, transplant has now been pushed back farther and farther and farther and farther and farther. So I'm still on chemo and I'm keeping my promise because I always keep my promises. And even though every day I'm like, I don't want to do this. This sucks, because I don't even know if the transplant is going to happen anymore. So,
and why?
Like, at this point, it's just being pushed back.
Right.
Well, mostly because of COVID. And another thing is, like, I have really bad depression and anxiety. I almost said anxiety. I'm also dyslexic. So for me, COVID was really hard for me. I had actually set up everything with leave for work, and I had set up my 6-month recovery time. all the time that I was going to be out. I had somebody set up that was going to come take care of me for a month. All these things. I had everything set up, and I got my eggs extracted so that I could try and have kids afterwards.
Wow.
And that was about 2 weeks before the transplant was supposed to take place back in August. And there were some complications with the egg retrieval surgery. And so I ended up spending about a week and a half in the hospital before the transplant was even, like, before I was supposed to go in for the transplant. And while I was in there, it was really high COVID time, right? It was August. Everybody was like, everything was shut down. And while I was in the hospital, it just got really bad. Like, I was super suicidal. They wouldn't let me see, like, my family couldn't come in and visit me. Not only could nobody come in and see me and visit me, but like, they wouldn't let me outside. They wouldn't even let me outside my room. And I was just like, I'm going insane. Like,
Sure.
I'm literally thinking about all these ways that I can freaking, like, kill myself in a hospital room. Like, I can't do this during COVID. There's no way I'm going to spend 6 weeks in a hospital by myself after almost dying from them taking out all of my bone marrow with chemo and radiation, and then injecting somebody else's bone marrow, and then doing another round of week and a half of chemo to kill off half of those cells, because my donor was my brother and we were only 50% matched. So they would have to kill off 50% of the bone marrow that they put in me. So it was just like a lot of things. And I think that was godsend. Like, me spending that week and a half in the hospital before the transplant, I was like, yep, we're postponing the transplant because I can't do this. I cannot do 6 weeks in a hospital without family and friends and company. Like, I would kill myself. So that was not a good time to feel, but it was a blessing in disguise that I didn't go in and start the transplant and then realize a week in and not be able to leave.
Sure.
So it was good. It was a good thing, but it also was a really sucky thing. And yeah.
Wow. Yeah. I've heard so many stories like this with COVID, where because people aren't able to see their families while they're having treatment or any kind of surgery and to me, it's just, that's the worst thing you can possibly do. We know that, connections with loved ones is the most healing thing possible. So to take that away from people
right?
at the time they need it the most is just, to me, quite a travesty. Yeah. So.
Yeah. And I think that showed, 1,000-fold during COVID.
Yeah.
The people that were stuck in the hospital with COVID or stuck in a nursing home tended, like, it's sad to say, but a high percentage of them did die. It's like, okay, but the people that got COVID that just stayed home and took care of themselves, just like they do with any other flu or any other respiratory illness,
yes,
they ended up living and they ended up getting through it. And I'm not saying that every person that stayed home lived either, right?
Sure.
But those that did,
yeah.
yeah. But those that do stay home and they use the same methods of healing that they use at every other time, their body is more likely to respond to that. If you've never been on a ventilator before, going in and being on a ventilator for COVID,
probably not.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
But this last year proves just how effective that was, right? And if you generally do all these different things to get rid of illness whenever you get sick, people generally get sick once to twice a year and they have their methods of getting over it, right? Some people always go to the hospital. Okay, so go to the hospital. If you don't normally go to the hospital though, being forced to go to the hospital when you have COVID and being forced to do all these things that your body isn't used to, of course there's going to be complications. And that sucks. Like, that really sucks. It's so sad. It's so sad. And I just don't know how to convey how sad and upset that it makes me that there's all these requirements, because it's such a feared thing right now.
Yeah. The fear, I think the pandemic is fear. That's really the pandemic.
Yeah.
The numbers otherwise
Yeah.
really qualify as a pandemic, but the fear definitely does, for sure.
Yeah.
And fear is very detrimental. I mean, people don't really talk about that aspect of it, but what the fear is doing to people. And that's actually something I wanted to bring up when you were talking about how you were kind of prepared to die, you know, from such an early age. You were prepared to die fairly young. I think that's really interesting. I'd love to hear more about your thought process of that, because a lot of you know, philosophers throughout the history, but certainly the existentialists, would talk about how, you know, one of the ways to face life and to maximize life, you know, to optimize your potential in life is to make peace with your death. You know, that the way to really, I should say, like,
oh yeah, I'm definitely at peace with death.
Well, it sounds like you were from
100%.
Were you aware that you were? Like, do you feel like that affects how you live now? I mean, from the outside, just listening to you, it sounds like it does. It sounds like in some ways you live more because you did make peace with death, which is what philosophers always said. So
yeah, and it's interesting. I never really read a lot of philosophy growing up, but I did. I think that there, for me at least, there was a feeling that I always had that was just like, well, today could be my last day. And today could be anybody's last day.
Of course.
From COVID, from a heart attack, from a car accident, like today could be anybody's last day. Sure. So, and that's not to say that I don't ever get into like depression slumps where literally I'll just lay in my bed for like 2 or 3 days, just depressed and upset and like sad. I don't know how else to put it, but just like sad, really sad, right? Yeah. Not to say that that doesn't happen, but most of the time, anybody that knows me is like, Danita is she laughs more than anybody I know. She does the craziest things. And I'm like, it's because I don't care. I also don't care what other people think about me, which is really helpful. It's really helpful because I just kind of do whatever I want. And obviously, if I know that I'm hurting somebody else, then I'll stop. But I tend to just, I'm like, oh, I want to try this. Okay, I'm going to do it. And I've done so many things throughout my life that I'm like, I probably could have died all the time. And I didn't. So I guess that's a good thing, right? And things like, I don't know.
That's a win. Surviving's a win. Yeah.
Yes. Well, and it got to the point to where when I got diagnosed, this will really tell you how much I live my life. When I got diagnosed at 21 years old, everyone I knew was like, so what's on your bucket list? I was like, nothing. I'm done. I've lived. Like, I've lived my life. I could die right now and just be completely fine. Like, wow. I've lived. And that's not to say that I don't like doing other things. Like, there's been things that I've done since I got diagnosed that I always wanted to do, but I just didn't care if I did them or not. Like traveling. Like, I went to Norway and Ireland and places like that, which were great. But it's not something that like I felt I needed to do before I died. You know? I don't know.
Well, I think that's amazing. I have a feeling there will be lots more experiences you'll be glad you had. But I think it's wonderful that you were able to at 21 say, I have done that. Nothing. You didn't let anything hold you back. You know, I think that's really what you're looking. You know, it's not that there aren't other things you'd like to experience or do or try, but you don't feel like you didn't hold back. And so that you don't have regrets in that sense. Yeah.
Well, and there's literally people that have like an actual bucket list and they're like, I have to do these things before I die. Otherwise I haven't lived. And I'm like, but don't you live every day? Like, don't you go out and just dance in the middle of the street screaming like a crazy person? Like, don't you do that? Doesn't everybody do that? Like, when you see somebody in the store that you think is like really, really attractive, don't you just go up to them and like, you know what? You are extremely attractive. I'm very glad that I saw you today. And people are always like, thank you. I'm like, you're welcome. And I just walk away. Like, I don't care, right? And for me, like I was saying in our conversation earlier today through text,
yeah,
I don't mean anything that I don't say. Like,
right.
I don't speak between the lines. And because of that, I don't read between the lines. So if you don't say it directly to me, I'm not going to understand what you get or what you mean. And like, it's just not going to happen, right?
Right.
And so that's just how I live my life. I live my life out in the open and completely just like, woo, right?
Awesome.
That's how I can explain it. Just woo.
I think that sums it up. Definitely. That's awesome. Yeah. So I want to ask you, since we're doing this Truth Matters, and yes, you're saying you like truth, you like facts. I can very much see that. I very much respect that. But I'm curious, you're obviously really passionate about politics, current events, and I'm curious where that came from. I mean, it sounds like you had an interest in the military from a very early age, but did you have an interest necessarily in politics from an early age, or is that more recent?
Well, it's actually kind of interesting. One of the families that was kind of my parents' good friends, they homeschooled their children as well. They were really into politics, like everything politics. And I mean, they would come over and talk about politics all the time. And as kids, we were like, what are you talking about? Like, stop. We don't want to hear this anymore. Like, let's just go outside and play, right? Let's go build a treehouse. Let's go build a chicken coop. Let's go do something crazy. Like, let's go race our cars down a back road, see who wins. Like, all this stuff, right? And they would like want to talk about politics. And I was like, that's so stupid. Like, nobody cares. Nobody. If they do care, why do they care? I don't understand. And it wasn't until I really, college got me, you know. I had this thing during college where I would go to the first day of class, okay? And I would talk to every professor and I'd be like, hey, I don't go to class. So I know that you have an attendance policy, but here's my deal I'll make with you. If I get anything less than 100% on any assignment or test, that includes finals, midterms, anything less than 100, you can dock every attendance that I don't attend class. And my teachers would be like, sure, like all cocky, like she doesn't know what she's doing. And the only time that ever backfired was I had gotten 100% on everything until my final exam. I got a 97% on the final exam. So I got 75% in the class because the attendance was 25%. And I was like, okay, that sucks, but it is what it is, right? So I got a C minus, only C minus in my college career. But that's just what I did, right? And there was this one teacher that she was like, you know what, you should be a lawyer. And I was like, And when I was in high school, I used to get told by my government teacher. Yeah, I think he probably told me it the most. He was like, you should be a politician because you're really good at remembering things and just like spewing all sorts of factual information. And then when somebody asks you if you have it on hand, like you will go and be like, it's on this page of this book of this. And I'm like, yeah, whatever. Okay. And when he used to say that, I was like, I don't want to be a politician though, because politics is just stupid. It's not fun and it's annoying. And like, I didn't see the benefit of it. And when I was in college and one of my professors was like, you should be a lawyer. I was like, I don't know. I don't like arguing. Right. And I feel like that's what a courtroom is like arguing. Mm-hmm. So after a few law classes, I got pretty good at, being the stand-in prosecutor and just like drilling people, right? Or being the defense prosecutor, or defense attorney, and being like, no, that's not true. And this is why it's not true, because this US code, this, and my teachers were just like, wow, right? And it was just interesting because when I was in college, I didn't feel like there was this huge left and right divide. I felt like people really were just trying to do what they thought was best, right? And then Hillary Clinton got on the ballot. I have a lot of negative feelings for Hillary Clinton. A lot of them. And how she dealt with military in Benghazi is a big reason why I started looking into politics.
Oh, wow.
Because that should not go unpunished. And the fact that she successfully ran for presidency and millions of people voted for her after that was already out in the open, that's when I really was like, people are not even seeing, and people that are seeing, they don't care. Like, how can you get away with this? Like, that's so wrong. And then President Trump, I mean, when he got on the ballot, honestly, I voted for him just because I was like, we need somebody who's not a politician. That's the only reason I voted for him, is because I was like, he is a businessman, right? A lot of my siblings own their own businesses and they're very successful. And they think in very logical terms of, if it doesn't benefit me and my business, then no, right? I'm not taking part in it unless it benefits me and my business, right? Sure. And so when Trump was running for presidency in 2016, I was like, yeah, I'll vote for him, because you know what? He is successful in business. And you know what this country needs? This country needs one of those boss makeover, business makeover people to come in and just like be like, you're all fired. You suck at your job. We're resetting this up, right?
Right.
Put up a new CEO, do everything, redo everything, right? So I voted for him for that reason. I was like, he's not a politician. He can't be bought off. And he's successful in business. And that's what this country needs right now.
Right.
So I voted for him. And then I really started getting even more and more into politics. Really, mostly because Hillary Clinton still was not being prosecuted. Nothing was happening. And I was just like, I was so upset. Like, yeah. And I know that there's a lot of things that people have done behind the scenes that are just as bad. But like, it was out in the open and nobody cared. Nobody saw. Those that did see didn't care. Okay. On the right and the left. And that pissed me off. And I was like, all right, so we're gonna, we're gonna start talking about politics with people. So ever since, well, I got diagnosed in 2016, right after Trump, well, right before Trump was elected. I was diagnosed in October. I was diagnosed in October of 2016 and like October 26th.
Okay.
And then a week later, I went out and voted for Donald Trump because he's amazing. Anyways, so yeah, that happened. And I mean, just month after month. And here's what I think about the whole situation. And I even talked to my doctor about this yesterday in my doctor's appointment.
Okay.
He goes, he's an older man. He's an older man. And he goes, you know what I just was so floored by is when Trump got into office, he is the only president in my lifetime. This guy is like in his 60s. So he's the only president in my lifetime that as soon as he was in office, he started doing what he said he was going to do, whether you liked it or not.
Yep.
Whether you agreed with him or not. Yep. He kept every single promise. Sure. Whether you liked the promise or not, he at least tried to keep it. And he did keep it, actually. Yep. He kept every promise he made while in office. And so for me, I'm like, okay, I take people at their word, right? So
It's a very foreign concept these
politicians,
days.
politicians, I don't really take it their word, right?
Right.
Anymore. Ever since I was little, I was like, oh, they're just all slimy sleazeballs. But that was something that when Trump successfully gained the presidency, I was like, yes. And then just success after success after success, whether I agreed with it or not, right? It was just success after success. Now, all of those successes came even with him being the most targeted political governmental official in history by not just people in the US, but all around the world. He accomplished so much while taking this crap 24/7 for 4 years straight. Imagine what he could have accomplished if they didn't do that. Like, our country would be what everybody dreams of a utopia being. I mean, it already did become that right before COVID. Like, the best economy the US has ever seen, the lowest unemployment rates in like 100 years. It's ridiculous. And all of these things, peace in the Middle East,
I know.
like, as a military
the media never talked about. The media,
no one could do that.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. And then when you go into like Melania, right? When you think about Melania, I think people always say, she's not even American, blah, blah, blah. How could she be? And I'm like, you know what? She is the ultimate American story. She came over from another country legally for modeling and other purposes, right? She came over to live the American dream. And what did she do? She became the freaking first lady of the United States. She speaks tons of languages.
6 languages.
She's so elegant. Like, oh my gosh. If she's not a success American dream story, who is? Like, who is?
Right. No, the way they treated her was just unbelievable to me. I mean, she is as you said, the epitome of the American dream, and she's, everything that you would want a female role model to be. She's classy, she's brilliant, she's, hardworking, she's successful, she's, a mother. I feel like she's everything you would want a role model to be, and they were nothing but awful to her.
Just so many things. And also for me, I like to look at opposites. So if something is presented to me and I'm like, oh, kind of like President Trump said in his speech at West Point, he said, the more righteous the fight, the greater the opposition will be. And I believe that wholeheartedly in my life. I mean, ever since I was a kid, I recognized that. I recognize that the more shitty my life is, and the more things that happen to me that are out of my control, the more I feel God's arms around me, just picking me up and being like, it's okay. It's okay. You can't control it. Cry, do what you want, live your life, be happy, smile, laugh, right? And when I feel like more and more stuff is happening to me that's out of my control, and literally just like attacks from, I say from Satan, some people might just say from negative entities or energies, the more I actually feel it uplifted and empowered by the Holy Ghost and the Holy Spirit. And for me, I'm like, I just look at President Trump. That CNN lies. That all these people are complete liars. Well, who is the king of deception? Lucifer, right? So if you know that all of these people who are complete deception, I mean, Hillary Clinton is complete deception all the time. If she has her sight set on something else that is creating good in this world, that is actually on paper, you see it's good. I mean, our taxes, our freedoms, our liberties, peace in the Middle East, like things like this. If all of these people are attacking this one person and this one person is actually bringing about good, I don't care who he is. I don't care if he's an asshole. I don't care if he says whatever he says about women's pussies. Like, he is doing good. And all these people hate him. And that to me is like, okay, because I see all this shit coming towards him, I know he must be doing good. Like, whether I think he's a great guy or not, like, whether I think that he's moral or not, whether I think that he is of good character or not, whether I think that he is polite or kind or not.
Right. Yeah.
He's bringing about good and prosperity for this land and for the people of this land, in spite of all the attacks. So,
and I think that's something that
there's your proof.
So they neglect to address, is that you're talking about politics and they jump straight to this, discussion of moral character, or this discussion of like, is he a nice person? I'm not picking the person that I want to have dinner with, or who I'm going to go, watch a game with, or whatever it is.
And even then, I'd still pick Donald Trump.
What? You're still
even then, I'd still pick Donald Trump.
Fair enough. I might as well. But that aside, that's not what you're picking for. You're picking based on policy needs to be a conversation. And what are going to be the ramifications of those actions and those policies that are being implemented? And I have a real problem with people having conversations about politics and all they do is discuss personality and, personality essentially. Or it's not even personality. It's media's portrayal of a persona. Because it's really not personality. A personal relationship with someone, you don't know their personality. You know what the media told you about their persona. It's not even their person, not even like portrayed personality. It's literally a media's portrayal of a persona. And you can't base, you can't have that be the focal point of a political discussion. So I think that's what I have a real
Yeah. Well, and it's just like, so in the music industry, right? For me, it's like the comparison of Simon Cowell, right?
Yeah.
Simon Cowell cannot sing. He cannot play instruments. He is rude. All of these things.
Yeah.
Just horrible face value, right?
Yep.
But what has he done? He didn't just like promote One Direction. He created One Direction from a bunch of guys, individual guys that got kicked off the show. Like, he created One Direction, one of the most successful boy bands in the freaking world. He created American Idol, one of the most successful singing competitions in the world. He brought about Kelly Clarkson and Carrie Underwood and all these people. And he created Little Mix, also one of the most successful girl bands in the entire world. He may not be able to sing, and he may be an asshole, and he may be a complete jerk.
Yep.
But who cares? If I were asked, who would you want to be judging you if you're singing? I'd be like, Simon Cowell, for sure. Because I know that if he told me, you suck, you sound like garbage, I'd be like, cool, I suck and I sound like garbage. I trust your judgment because you have created amazing things.
Yep.
And that's why I'm like, okay, if Trump was like, you're a scumbag, I'd be like, cool, I don't care, right? But at least I'm like, you are doing what you said you were going to do. And this shows true right now, especially right in the first month. Well, not even just the first month, the first week and a half of this presidency. What has it been? It's actually been 2 weeks now because it's Wednesday. The first 2 weeks of this presidency, which is Joe Biden, how many people online are already saying that they openly saying that they regret voting for Joe Biden?
Yep.
Thousands and thousands and thousands of them.
Yep.
Okay. No one did that with Trump.
No.
Because Trump kept his word.
Yeah.
And if they voted for Trump, they knew he was going to build a wall. And if they didn't want him to build a wall, they wouldn't have voted for him.
Exactly.
And when they voted for Trump, they knew he was going to crack down on immigration, illegal immigration, not immigration. They knew he was going to crack down on illegal immigration.
Yep.
If they didn't like that, they wouldn't have voted for him.
Exactly.
Right? Like all of these things, he kept his word. Whether you liked it or not, he kept his word. And you already see in the first 2 weeks of Joe Biden, yeah,
Yeah, he hasn't kept
Yeah.
his word on anything. Well, and it was hard to know what his word was because he flip-flopped on things so much. Like he's going to ban fracking, he's not going to ban fracking. I mean, there's a long list.
Yeah.
But, it was hard to know where
he's Catholic and he respects human life. But in his first 2 weeks, he already donated over $125 million to Planned Parenthood from federal funds, which are my taxpayer money. And you know what? I think maybe I'm going to stop paying taxes. No, how are we supposed to go about that?
Well, it's a really that's actually an interesting conversation, because I think one of the things I keep bringing up personally is that this country, one of the founding tenets of this country is that it's consent of the governed. And that is a very unique principle that is not shared around the world. And it is very unique to us, and it is a founding principle. And yet we've lost a lot of that. It's no longer consent of the governed, which is really everything for which we stand. And taxes are just that, right? Taxation without representation is tyranny. That's what we fought our revolution for. So if everybody were to get up and say, I'm not paying taxes because my funds are not being allocated in a way that I consent to, that would be, there is a conversation to be had about that. I don't really see people rising up, that there's not the same type of fight. And when I say fight, I don't mean physical fight. I mean, there's not that same courage of convictions that there once was, that this country was founded upon. So.
Well, and that's another thing that I've actually discussed with one of my friends from Finland, is that he's like, well, socialism works here and we love it. And I'm like, yeah, but you have 5 million people in your entire country, first of all.
Less than the city of LA.
Second of all, people that don't want to live in a socialist Finland, where do they go to? They immigrate to the US. People that don't want to live in socialist France or Italy or any other of the European socialist countries, where do they go to? They go to the US. We are the last place for them to escape to.
Yep.
So when you try socialism here in the US, no. And if you want to live socialism in the US, then go live in your own community, and you can have your own state like California, and you can run it to the ground just like California, and you can blow yourselves up just like California, and you can just have absolutely horrible, horrible economy just like California. And it's just, if that's what you want to do, go for it. But don't force me to do that. Like, I don't want to do that, because you know what forced socialism is? That's communism. That's not socialism anymore. That's communism. So if he doesn't want to participate in socialism and you are forcing them to do so, that's not socialism anymore. And that's not okay.
No, I couldn't agree more. I think the other thing that people don't quite understand is that Scandinavian countries may be socialistic in their wealth distribution, but they're not really socialistic in their wealth production. They have some capitalistic elements to their wealth creation.
Yeah. That's for sure too. Yeah.
So, and that is part of why it works the way that it works. I mean, there are a lot of other factors. The fact that there's a very small population in most of those countries, the fact that it's a very homogeneous population. You want to talk about borders, their immigration policies are really stringent.
Extreme. Oh my gosh. To become a citizen in Norway, you have to denounce your previous citizenship of your other country before they even accept you.
Yep.
So if you denounce your citizenship from your other country, say the USA, and then they don't accept you, you become a citizen of nowhere. Then where do you go? Like, where do you go? No. So for people to be like, well, having closed borders, that's just wrong. That's just wrong. And I'm like, oh my gosh. Well, everywhere else accepts immigrants. Yeah, legal immigrants.
Yep.
And we love legal immigrants. We love them.
Yes,
we are made up of legal immigrants.
Yeah.
Yes.
Everybody in this country is an immigrant.
Illegal immigrant.
Yeah.
Yeah. At some point,
Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't know. That's the big thing for me. So I'm just like, and people that try to fight it on a religious level, I'm like, here's the thing though. It's like Jesus's plan versus Satan's plan. Jesus said, of course, I want all of you to return to heaven. and I'll come down there and I'll die for you, I'll sacrifice for you, but you're still going to have the choice, right? You'll still be able to choose whether you want to be righteous or not, whether you want to live with God again or not. Satan's plan was to come down and make everyone do the right thing all the time and make everyone be righteous so that everyone had to return to God. That's for socialism. That's what that sounds like to me.
No,
forcing someone to be correct and forcing someone to give up of their wealth and be kind to their neighbors, forcing someone to help out around in their community, that is not choice. And it's not true in the heart. That's disingenuous.
I so agree. I'm more spiritual necessarily than I am religious, but I, without a doubt, I like unequivocally believe that this country was divine intervention to preserve the free will of humanity. And I think that is why it is so essential and imperative that we continue to fight for freedom here, because that is fighting for freedom around the world and for the preservation of the potential for liberty elsewhere. And when we go, we fall, the rest of the world follows. And I do believe, I'm not somebody who worships Trump. I think he's human and he's certainly not infallible. He's making mistakes.
Agreed.
However, I do think there is a sense of divine intervention in the sense that he was a stopgap to a socialistic, communistic trajectory. And this country has, and I hope, knock on wood, that it always will be the beacon of light and hope for, free will. Because without free will, I don't think humanity survives. We look back in history.
Well,
communism has hundreds of millions of corpses, always. So
yeah, always. And that's something that I'm just like, that's another reason why I've been more vocal, on social media, until I deleted all my accounts. But I've been more vocal on social media and things like that about politics in the last year. Yeah. Ever since it really, we've seen some nasty censorship happening.
Yep.
And speaking with my friends out of this country, I'm like, hey, this is happening right now. And they're like, that's nowhere on the news. I'm like, yeah, you think? And then I tell them about something that happened a week ago and they're like, oh, I don't know if I believe that because it wasn't on the news here and I can't find it anywhere online. I'm like, of course you can't find it online. Because what are you doing? You're searching on Google, aren't you? Well, Yahoo, Google, Bing, they're all in bed together. Anyway, so I've been much more vocal, that's for sure. And I really, obviously I'm military and I would die for my freedoms and the freedoms of other people. And I think that there's some things that obviously I hope that we can get back to our freedoms and our liberty through discourse.
Through what?
And other means. Discourse. If not, I do see the place happening where, we may have to not just fight intellectually for our freedoms. We may have to actually fight one of these days in person for our freedoms. And I'm ready for that. Do I want that to happen? Of course not. Anybody that logically thinks about it.
Anybody who really understands what that means, no.
Yeah, they really don't want that. But are they ready for it? And are they going to do it when that happens? Oh, heck yes. I've always said through all this, I said, if Joe Biden wins, then Joe Biden wins. Then he wins. And he can do what he wants. But once somebody comes to hurt my family, or if somebody comes to try to take my guns away from me, they're going to die.
I think a lot of people share that sentiment.
That's as simple as it is.
Yep.
And that's not too much to ask for. I don't think that's so much to ask for. I have given up going to church every Sunday. I have given up so many things to this pandemic due to the left. And I'm like, okay, that is not something that I'm going to take up arms about yet.
Right.
Of course, I'm going to speak about it on social media. I'm going to speak about it to people. I'm going to talk to people about it. I'm going to show them things. I'm going to express my opinion. But those two things are the things that really, I mean, there will be blood if one of those two things happens.
Yeah.
And I think that that's probably the biggest consensus with most conservatives.
I think so too.
Is that
what I hear as well.
They're not really going to take up arms. They're not going to do any of that until one of those two things happens. One of those things happens though, boy, do we not just have a psychological war on our hands. We will have a civil war on our hands, and there will be millions that die, and it will be so catastrophic. And all President Trump wanted was for that not to happen.
Yeah.
He did not want war. He didn't want a civil war. He didn't want any wars anywhere, which is why he's the only president in recent history to not start a war during his presidency. He doesn't want war. He doesn't want it.
No. He brought all the troops home.
And they do. Yeah.
Yeah. No.
So I don't know. It's also like, am I going to play into their war though? Like, am I going to play into their prodding? Because that's all they want. They do want war. They want that to happen. They just don't want to be the first one to make the move, even though they've been making the move all last year, killing people in the streets, ripping them out of their cars, beating them to death in the streets, blood in the streets, all these things. Nothing happens. No. Look, the vice president of the USA right now even paid for some of those people to get out of jail because they were protesting. Killing people in the streets, but they were protesting.
Right. Yeah. I loved when Babylon Bee wrote the new Nobel Prize, the new mostly peaceful Nobel Prize for BLM. Yeah.
Seriously though.
Yeah. Anyway. That for me, that's what, like you said with Hillary, that was what really got you interested in politics, was the injustice of what happened with Hillary. And for me, that's just rampant through everything, is that all of these people are not paying consequences for their actions. And
there's no accountability.
There's no accountability. And I don't just, I fault, the right for that as well. There needs to be more accountability. It's not.
Oh yeah. Both sides.
Yep. Yeah.
Yeah. And I also love, I love the new representatives in Congress, the new ones that we elected, like Matt Gaetz or even Senator Crawley. He's Congress, but he's not he's House member. And Madison Cawthorn, like all these people that,
great,
because they haven't been in politics their entire life,
right,
they feel what we feel and they see what we see, and now they're able to go in there and be like, F you, right, to those people's faces, because we can't get to those people's faces. But they're like, no, we're not doing this. We're not taking it. And I feel like Trump did that. Without Trump, none of those people would have been elected. We would have just continued down the road towards communism. And Trump made it possible for people to see that, hey, I don't have to be in politics my whole life to be elected senator and congressman or congresswoman. I can just start a campaign. And if I get enough supporters, then I'll make it, right? Whereas no one had done that before. It was always like, it was a familial thing, almost like you were saying when I was talking about Ivanka running, it was like a royalist thing where families are, and it really was just like being passed down one to another. And I'm like, okay, but here's the thing.
Would not have supported that. Yep.
If you have rightful competitors and that person wins because they are the most qualified for the job, then have at it. And if they happen to be from the same family, then that just means they're good at breeding. But if it's literally being passed down to the next person, right, because nobody else is willing to run for office, or everybody else is being silenced when they run for office, that is not, that's not okay. And I feel like Trump brought a whole new breed of politics and politicians into the field. And I'm very grateful for him for that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Do we So I think we both agree that this was a color revolution. That's my thought, and I think you you had said you do agree with that. So if this is a color revolution, do you see that there is a path to reversing it where we can restore our constitutional republic, and return to essentially to a free country? And how do you see that path forward if you do?
I think I kind of mentioned it before, but I think that I would love for it to happen civilly and through discourse and through just actual legal punishment and accountability and things like that. I would love for that to happen. And the fact that the Democrats successfully got away with rigging a presidential election out in the open with so much evidence, and literally no consequences. I don't know that it can happen civilly anymore. I don't know. I really would hope that it does. I hope that it does. And that's why I'm doing everything that I can with TruthMatters and things like that to really show people the way. Because, I mean, if we have 200 million people vote for Republicans and then only 10 million vote for the left, there's no way they can make up numbers to beat that, right? So if we can get enough people to see the light, then I think that maybe it could. And I will do everything in my power to make sure that it happens in that way first.
Yeah.
If not, we were kind of talking about this earlier as well. Marjorie Taylor Greene, mm-hmm. right? She had said in an interview saying that it might come, our freedoms and liberty might come to only be saved by blood. And then she later said, I would rather it be my blood than my children's blood. So my thing is, I have the same view. I would hope that we could do this and solve this and go back to where we have our freedoms and our liberties intact and the Constitution as the law of the land, and the governed are the ones that are truly governing. I would love for that to happen. And I'll do everything in my power for that to happen first. But I have family, and I do see things happening that I'm like, if it doesn't happen that way, peacefully and legally, not that a revolution isn't legal. It is legal according to the Constitution, right? It's actually a duty to do according to the Constitution if it gets that bad. And I think that it has gotten that bad. But I think that there's still that little bit of hope that somebody is doing something worthwhile behind the scenes to stop it all. And if they're not, then it does come to blood. I would rather it be my blood than my nieces and nephews' blood. I would rather that it be here and now so that I can fight for them and for their livelihood than for me to be dead from cancer, right? A few years down the road, say I die from cancer, and then my nieces and nephews at ages of anywhere from like 10 to 20 are the ones fighting and dying and having to kill other people in order to stay free. Like, I don't think people understand what that takes. That takes a lot to do that. Not just to go and stand in front of a gun that's pointed at you, but to actually pull the trigger of a gun pointed at somebody else.
Yeah.
And I would rather, wholeheartedly, that be me that has to do that and take on that burden than my little nieces and nephews. And if it's going to happen, I mean, the slowness right now is kind of what kills me, is that We don't actually see what's going on behind the scenes. We don't actually know if anything is fixing or being rerouted from the color revolution, right? We don't know if it's actually being rerouted back towards our Constitution and back towards our freedoms and liberties, because all we see is mainstream media, and they are completely deceptive. Yeah. So it's hard to have faith. It's hard to have hope. But I think that faith and hope are both action words, and there's something that you just have to do every day, and you have to choose every second of every day. You can't just be like, hey, well, I have faith everything's going to turn out, and then go about your life. Like, that's what got us into this freaking mess in the first place. Is people say, oh, I have faith everything's going to be fine, and our politicians are going to do what I elect them to do. So let's elect whoever has an R by their name or a D by their name. Like, no, you have to fight. And I would rather the fight stay civil and discourse and legal action. I would rather it not become a civil war. Am I prepared for a civil war? Yes. That is my simple answer. Yes, I am prepared.
Right.
Do I hope that it happens?
No. I do think I'm hearing a lot of that shared sentiment. I mean, none of us who actually understand what war means want war. But none of us who value our Constitution want to see that trampled on any more than it already has been. So, yeah, absolutely. So you brought up the media, and I think that they are, a huge, I think they're complicit in the problem. And I think that they're a huge part of why we're in the position we're in currently. But I think they're also part of why people aren't taking the action. And by action, I'm not talking about physical fighting at this time. That's not what I mean. But I think people are, as you
said. At this time.
What? What did you say?
At this time.
Right.
I said at this time.
Yeah, exactly. I think that, as you said, they're very passive, if they're even so much as voting, which not everybody is, because a lot of people don't even vote. They think the people who do, a lot of people just vote in the federal election every 4 years. They don't even participate in their local elections, where we have a lot more control, a lot more power. And people really should be getting very involved at that level, especially now, I think. But a lot of people don't, and they vote kind of blindly if they do, in fact, vote. But there's so much more that people can be doing. And I think people are just sitting back because, one, they don't know much about civics. It's not taught in school. And two, I think there's a lot of things going on. But I think the media has, I know, like there's so many things going through my head right now. The media is a huge part of it, because the media has kind of created this narrative, and then the people who buy it, okay, we'll just sit back. And that is, as I go back to, it's supposed to be consent of the governed, right? It was never designed to be one man, one plan. It was never supposed to be that would save us. It was supposed to be the action of the constituents every day to exercise their freedoms. And I think a huge part of taking that back does stem from having there be truth in the media. And I think that, having a place where people can go to just see the truth. And, I'll admit I was totally guilty of it in our conversation this morning, when we were talking about Marjorie. I had taken sound bites that people had heard in the media and that people I trusted had repeated. And, I took that as face value, and I had made a judgment that was not accurate. And I still have more research to do of my own to, before I would make public conclusions that I, and formulate an opinion that's, concrete. But that is what we do. And I think that that's human nature, that we're wired to do that. But I think that we need to resist that tendency. And I think a lot of that stems from...
I think that's probably one of the best things about the Constitution is it's innocent until proven guilty. Mm-hmm. The problem is that the media portrays everyone on the right as guilty until proven innocent. And even after they're proven innocent, they're still guilty. And everyone on the left are proven innocent even if they are guilty.
Yep.
or they're seen as innocent, even if they're proven guilty.
Right.
So there's just that contrast, right? And I think that
and that stems from Herbert Marcuse's liberating tolerance. But yes.
Yeah. I think that Trump, that's probably one of the best things about Trump not being president right now, honestly, is people are finally seeing we can't just depend on Trump to save our entire country. Yeah. He's one man. I mean, you saw how much good he did on his own, and not even just on his own, but against all odds for 4 years, the most persecuted president in our history, and how much good he did, right? But he showed us that we, as individuals, we have to elect people that are actually going to fight for us. We can't just depend on the GOP or the Democrats, right? We have to vote for people that want our interests and have our interests at heart. Okay. If we don't elect them, we need to be running for office ourselves. Like, oh my gosh, if we do not run for office, or we can't run for office, say you're too young or you have different things that make that not possible, right? We need to be doing stuff in our own communities. We need to be signing up to be the election supervisors of counting the votes. We need to be doing things to save our own communities, talking about schools, talking about immunizations. Yep. Like, honestly, at this point, the government hasn't required that all government employees get the COVID-19 vaccine yet. If they do, I will not be working for DHS anymore.
Pardon?
Yeah. I said, if they do require it, I will not be working for DHS anymore, because there's no way in hell I'm getting a COVID-19 vaccine. Yeah. Even in 5 years, and they've proven that they don't have as many side effects as everybody thought. Okay, cool. I'm still not getting it. My family never got vaccines growing up. And you know what? I barely get sick once a year with zero immune system because of my cancer. Everybody else is always sick. Who never gets sick? This girl. Who doesn't have an immune system? This girl. How do I not get sick? I don't freaking know. Like, I take care of my body. That's how. I don't know. But I'm just like, and I don't have vaccines. I don't get vaccines. My family doesn't get vaccines. For people, it's your choice, right? Your body, your choice. And
yeah, and this is
somebody else's body, their choice. The problem with the whole abortion thing is you are killing somebody else's body. Their body is already formed. It's already forming. It's already there. And if you can't tell me when consciousness starts, then you can't tell me that you're not killing somebody. Right. That's how I see it.
I happen to be much more aligned with you on that. I actually was the doctor. My mom's doctor was dyslexic, and his dyslexia saved my life. So had he read the titer, reverse the numbers, I would have been aborted, and I would not be here. Yeah. So no, I mean, I'm very grateful for his, his dyslexia and his mistake. But I think
that's a dang good mistake.
You saved my life. But I think because of that, I have a unique kind of perspective on life and on, who gets to decide what life has value. I think that's where it is. I think for me, that's where the issue stems. It's somebody making a judgment on whose life is valuable. And I'm not so sure that, that's a decision that, should be made so accessible and promulgated. I think that they push it, they push abortion. I'm not sure that that's a morally sound kind of thing to be pushing on people. Especially given that, they didn't think I should survive, and I'm very grateful to be here. And so, I have a very, I think it's a personal, unique kind of perspective on it. But with the vaccines, this is another thing where, having access to truthful information really comes into play. Because, very few people even know what happened with they call it the vaccine courts in 1988. And, it grants a tremendous amount of impunity to the vaccine companies. And if you look at the trajectory from that date forward, the number of vaccines that were mandated increased drastically year after year. And I don't think that's a coincidence. So, that's a position that
it's all about money, and it's always about money, sadly.
And it is. And I think that so when you talk about information, because I think that, for me, as somebody, my parents weren't vaccinated, which is why I was born with congenital rubella. So I had a very different kind of position on it years ago. And the more I learned about what was happening in the history of vaccines, the more my position started to change. I was willing to admit that I was wrong, and I was wrong largely due to the information I was being fed and the lack of accessibility to information. I didn't have anything years ago. There wasn't anything other than Google, so I was Googling and not realizing so much information was being hidden from me. So I think that is a huge problem. And that's not to say that my position is right or that somebody else who wants to vaccinate shouldn't vaccinate. They should have the choice because, like for instance, my sister is anaphylactic. They've shown that many people who are anaphylactic and take the vaccine, they die. Their systems cannot handle it. She should not be forced to take it. I have several health complications. I should not be forced to take something that we don't know how I'll react to it. That should be my decision. I should be able to make an informed decision on it. So yeah, medical freedom, I think, is something we definitely really need to be fighting for. And I think medical freedom comes hand in hand with information freedom, and accessibility to true information.
And information freedom is, there's always going to be people that don't look stuff up. There's always going to be people that truly don't care and they're just going to go along with it, whatever it is. Okay. There's always going to be those people.
Yeah.
But as you can see, what's happening right now with the free speech revolution that is happening right now, the more people know, then the more people will know.
Yes.
Like the more the few know, then the more people will become knowledgeable, right? So the size of the people that research and the size of the groups of people that go out and do their own research and form their own opinions, that size group will grow the more free the information is provided.
Yes.
And when it's constricted, that's when we get, this didn't just happen yesterday. This didn't even just happen 30 years ago. This started like 100 years ago, okay, where they started restricting all this information. And then we get to this point now where 4 generations down, 5 generations down, people are just like, well, they must be telling the truth, so I don't care. I'm like, what? So I don't know. And that's also something that, like, being homeschooled, my parents taught us in a very, very strange way, even compared to other homeschool families. Okay. My parents had a library and we had tons of books of all different grade levels on each subject, whether it be history, world religion, science, biology, like all different types of sciences, law. One of our assignments as kids was to read the dictionary, like the whole dictionary. Okay.
Yep.
And so that's something that's like, when we were younger, if we had a question, we asked our mom, like, hey, somebody mentioned this the other day, what does it mean? She'd be like, go look in the encyclopedia. We had at least 4 different sets of like 10 books sets of encyclopedias. Yeah. So that if one person was using these 5 encyclopedias at once, the A through K of the encyclopedia, then somebody could go use another A through K encyclopedia. And what we did for schooling was, my parents said, you have to pick 1 book from each subject per year and complete it. I don't care how fast it takes you. I don't care if it takes you 2 weeks and then you're done. Then you don't have to school the rest of the year. That's great, right? So a lot of us kids, like, we would just blaze through our books, right? And I think that's also why I learned really fast. Yeah. And I'll pick up on things really, really quickly. Because when I was little, I'm like, ooh, if I finish this entire math book that's supposed to take me a year, if I finish it in 2 months,
You were incentivized.
getting every answer correct. Oh yeah, I didn't have to do schoolwork the whole rest of the year. Like,
That's awesome.
It was great. I could never have to do schoolwork for a whole year. Like, it was fantastic, right? And so, growing up, that's how our homeschooling was. It wasn't like we sit down and our parents teach us this subject, right? Whereas, I mean, a lot of other homeschooling families did that. And for about a year, we actually did that with a homeschooling group where we got together with other homeschooling families and the parents taught each class. Like, one of the parents, she was really knowledgeable about history. So she taught all the kids about history, right? Which isn't a bad thing. But then you still have like assignments and you have to go with the pace of the class, which as a homeschooled person, I'm like, this is taking way too long. So I went to high school and my first math class, oh my gosh, we went over the same chapter in the book for an entire week, every day. And I was like, I'm going to explode. And I yelled at one of the kids in class. And I'm this like just barely starting high school, right? And I'm taking this calculus class. Yeah. And I'm like, you asked that same question yesterday. And he was like, and I was like, I already told you the answer yesterday. Why are you asking that question again? I was so mad. And he was like, because I didn't understand it. I was like, you understood it yesterday. You said you understood it. So why are we going over this again? And then the next day, what happened? Another person in the class asked the same exact question. I was like, were you not listening when the teacher explained it yesterday and the day before? Why are we doing this? Oh my gosh. I was just like, public school was not a good thing for me in high school. There's a reason I graduated 2 years early.
But I'm just like, oh. But what I think is great is that your parents really encouraged critical thinking. And I think that that's part of what we're seeing is really missing today and I think that is actually part of the problem with the media is that people are so used to being fed what to think that nobody knows how to think for themselves anymore. So like you said, your parents would give you I was not homeschooled, but my dad did something very similar. He bought me almanacs, he bought me encyclopedias. And I actually, as a kid, I insisted that my parents had like family dinner. And I did it because I wanted to learn from them. And I remember they had big vocabularies. And so I would always learn new words. My dad would never explain a word to me. He'd be like, you have to go upstairs and look it up in the dictionary. And then I would ask him like, well, yes, right? And he bought me an etymological encyclopedia. Well, it's an etymological dictionary, so I would have to go look that up. He's like, I'm not going to tell you. And I think I bring up this point because, I think one of the things that we share is we're very inquisitive. And so we're looking for things. And as you said, there are lots of people who won't research. There are lots of people who are not looking for the truth. But I think in part it's because people have not been taught to. Not everybody is going to be a critical thinker. But if somebody has the proclivity and it's not developed, they're never going to be. And so I think that, we're so used to in the mainstream media, you go to one side to find one answer, you go to another side to find the other answer, but there are very few, journalism used to be just reporting facts. Now, somebody's always going to have a bias and you're receiving information through their lens, they're human. It's not, possible for them to completely absolve themselves of their bias. But there's a big difference between here's what you're supposed to think and here are the facts that I've collected and it's coming through my bias. There's a big difference between those two. And I think the former is most of what we're seeing. And that is part of why we have a culture now where nobody questions anything and they just comply. And I think that's what's really destroying our society currently. So.
Yeah. And it's destroying everybody individually as well as society. It destroys you. When you are not free thinking, you might think that you're happy, but ignorance is not bliss.
No.
Like, it's not. I'm sorry. It might be fake bliss, but it's not happiness and it is not fulfillment. Ignorance is sad. Like, you will get to a point where you have entered a conversation where everybody knows more than you, and you will feel like a freaking idiot because you didn't know to go and research, and you didn't take the steps to go and do so either. So it's just like,
I think the greater danger, that, you know, that's certainly a possibility, but I think one of the greater dangers is then you're more likely to be manipulated. And I think that's what we're seeing, you know, where all this compliance. So, well,
oh yeah,
I think this has been wonderful. I think we're coming up on, we should probably wrap this up. We'll do this again.
Probably. I think we're over 2 hours now.
Several more hours. So we'll definitely do this again.
Yes.
But do you have anything else you want to add, wrap up with, or give you any clues?
I mean, so we're getting our website set up, right? Yes. And you interviewed Ethan on your podcast about a week ago, if I know correctly. And so, just like a little shameless plug, we are starting a company called TruthMatters, where we hope to just present you with facts, true journalism. Like Courtenay was saying, in the olden days, journalism used to just be pure facts. And you know what? I put out on TruthMatters the other day some stuff about the two new lawyers, the two attorneys on Trump's legal team. Some of the things that I found out about them do not support my beliefs about Trump, but I put it out on TruthMatters Telegram page and on our Gab page, and you can go and read about what we found out about them. Their ties to Jeffrey Epstein, their ties to Roger Stone, and also Bruce Castor's ties to not choosing to not prosecute Bill Cosby for sexual assault back when he was the district attorney. So there are things that obviously, like she was saying, or like Courtenay was saying, there's bias in everything, but we're going to try and present just true facts and also ask you questions at the end of our articles or our videos or our blogs or just our little blurbs on Instagram, our posts. We want to ask you questions to get you researching, right? We don't want to present all the research that we have, because then what does that do? That makes it so that you don't ever have to actually go and find research yourself, okay? We want to encourage people to go and find research themselves. So we're going to give a little bit of fact with a couple of references and be like, go read, go look it up, go and get both sides of every story, get both sides. So that's just my little shameless plug. We're going to start, our website is getting set up in the next week or two, and then we'll be able to actually post like real articles and videos. You'll be able to find us on YouTube and Telegram and BitChute. And what else are we doing then? Are we doing Patreon?
Yeah,
I don't think we've talked about that one yet, but
I don't know yet. We're going to discuss that tonight.
Okay.
But yeah. We'll definitely do BitChute. We'll definitely do Telegram, Gab, YouTube. We'll put up a formal website too, and the website will kind of be the hub so that people it'll offshoot to all the other links that we have.
Yeah, for sure. So guys, go follow TruthMatters. So we're excited. We're excited to start it, and we keep each other in check.
Yeah,
the three of us.
We
keep each other in check, so it's good.
Yeah, no, it's
we are.
Yeah, it's a good balance.
But we could go on for hours. Like you and I, we've gone on for it's over 2 hours now.
I think so. Yeah,
not really noticing. So we're very different, right? I think that's good. It's good to have discourse and talk. So
exactly. Yeah. So do you have any place that we'll definitely put the links for the Truth Matters, and do you have any other places for people to find you if they want to, or do you want to promote? Or not?
I mean, I have a YouTube page. I sing on YouTube. I do music videos. I also have some stuff on there about my cancer, and I did a video of just during my week and a half in the hospital with this latest little thing with the fertility preservation and my misery in there and my stomach growing. I gained 25 pounds in 36 hours and then lost 32 pounds in 40 hours. So I gained a lot of new stretch marks, and you can go watch like all sorts of videos on YouTube. I do just weird things, fun things, and then I have a couple videos about Trump, and so yeah.
Awesome.
That's all I really have, though. I deleted my Instagram because Instagram sucks.
Right.
And Facebook sucks. And Twitter sucks. You all suck.
There you have it. All right. We'll definitely do this again. Thank you so much. It was awesome.
Yeah, for sure. Thanks for having me, Courtney. I'm so excited. And I'm excited to start our podcast, too, with Truth Matters. So,
Yay, me too.
I'm excited.